32-year-old Amelia came to us trapped in a tumultuous marriage, riddled with uncertainty due to her husband Marcus's volatile tendencies. Over time, his explosive outbursts have intensified, leading Amelia to consistently feel fearful and on edge. She suffers significant distress stemming from her husband's erratic and emotionally abusive behavior. This consistent volatility has left her feeling profoundly anxious and uncertain in her daily life. The notes say that she suffers with ongoing stress, suicidal ideation, and struggles with decision-making. It's crucial that professional guidance is sought immediately. Welcome to Emotional Bites. I'm Bryce Burroughs. This is what the research says. Emotionally volatile relational patterns create a cycle of abuse where periods of calm are interspersed with aggression. This induces sustained hypervigilance and paralyzing fear in the victim. Chronic exposure to this unpredictability impairs executive functioning and triggers learned helplessness, rendering individuals unable to accurately appraise danger or alter their circumstances. This dynamic is reinforced by coercive control and dominance behavior. The volatile partner often demands submission and compliance to maintain their version of relationship security. Ultimately, the victim's anxiety serves as both a realistic response to threat and a mechanism for entrapment within the relationship. Today, this is discussed by Lola Adams and Jazz Mendola. Take it away, Lola.
Thank you so much, Bryce. This issue is really one of codependency. You know, after being in this business for many years now, I've come to believe that often when we fall in love, it makes sense that we would choose a partner who mirrors an image back to us that reflects how we want to be seen as a person. But when we also believe that our partner's validation of who we are matters more than our own, that's when this process goes completely off the rails. What do you think, Jazz?
Lola, you know I don't do psychoanalytic mumbo jumbo, but you're on the ball as always. Love is a complex animal, that's for sure. I swear every time I go on one of these shows, I feel like I'm in the Matrix and no one told me about the red pill. So what's the crazy shit we're dissecting today? Are we actually talking about real human beings with real problems?
Jazz, darling, you know me. I only deal in the highest levels of dysfunction. Today, we've got a case study that reads like a soap opera. Picture this. A woman named Amelia who's been married to Marcus, a man I'd describe as emotionally unstable with a penchant for explosive outbursts. Think volcano meets toddler having a meltdown in the produce aisle. And our dear Amelia, she's so conditioned to this behavior that she's a perfect case study for our dive into codependency. But you know what really stands out to me about this case? It's that Amelia literally had her nervous system rewired by her partner's emotional instability.
Rewired nervous systems? Yeah, I've read that book. It's called Learning to Lose Yourself, Resent Your Partner, and Hate Your Life. Lola, you know what gets me? How people normalize this shit. Like, if your partner screams at you for asking them to take out the trash or pick up some milk, that's just become your thing now that you need to tolerate if you want to make the relationship work. Then you start asking yourself, when did my amazing relationship get replaced by this sick game of don't trigger the rage monster?
You know what I find fascinating? The way Amelia's brain created these narratives to make it all make sense. Like, if I just do this one thing, then maybe he won't explode. It's like trying to calm a rabid raccoon with a plate of cookies. Her brain was convinced it was a viable strategy even after she ended up covered in scratches.
It's so ingrained in them that they think that's just how relationships work. Love, fear, rage, all mixed up in one toxic cocktail of shared psychosis.
You think it's all just normal married life.
Yeah, we'll dive into how this gets normalized later, but answer me this, Jazz. On a scale of mildly inconvenient to full-on psychological warfare, how would you rate codependency as a problem?
On that scale, codependency is like emotional waterboarding with a side of chemical weapons. What happens is that people in these relationships convince themselves that if they just try harder or change more, they can make it work. And it's hard to shift that mindset. The thing that drives us all crazy is that they can't see anything else when they're living inside the dysfunction.
That's right, Jazz. In the end, Amelia had to confront the fact that she had been accepting less than she deserved for years. And that kind of self revelation can be scarier than any explosive outburst.
One of the biggest challenges for people in codependent relationships is one, overcoming the fear about their partner's reaction if they leave. But two, it's also what they might discover about themselves once they do. Lola, have you ever had a client who stayed in a relationship like this because they were scared of what being outside of the relationship would be like? Like their own mind was holding them hostage?
Oh, yeah. I've seen this, the what if I'm actually unlovable syndrome. It's like a never ending horror movie where the killer is your own self doubt. And let me tell you, Jess, life outside of their dysfunctional relationship is terrifying to them. Freedom is the scariest thing for someone who's been trapped in a cage for a long time.
I had a client who stayed with her abusive partner because she was afraid of failing at marriage. Like, come on, failing at marriage is actually an upgrade from being yelled at every day.
Failing at marriage versus succeeding at madness. Although it seems straightforward, that's a tough choice for some people. But that's a call I would only allow the client to make. I would never tell a client to leave a relationship. I may tell them they need to temporarily relocate to a safe space, but what I always do is help them grow enough to make that call objectively.
But here's the thing that gets me. This isn't just a relationship problem. It's a systemic issue. We've created a society where the cost of emotional labor is ignored, and people are taught to prioritize their partner's feelings over their own. Lola, you know what I think? I think we need to rewrite the manual on what it means to be in a healthy partnership. Like, I'm sorry, but if your partner makes you feel unsafe, that should be a deal breaker, not an opportunity for personal growth.
Yeah, I hear you, Jazz, but for some people, it does force them to grow. Like when they know they've hit rock bottom. I had a client once who would literally feel bad when she set a personal boundary. She'd be like, I feel so guilty for saying no to him. Then the next minute she's saying, I actually hate myself for agreeing to do that. It's like she only had two personalities, the people pleaser and the self-loather. It's like her protector was so focused on protecting the relationship, it was completely ignoring her own needs for autonomy. And she had no idea why she was feeling so bad. She actually needed to go through a process of developing more granularity. That's before she could even consider making a decision about whether she should stay or go.
Yeah, I've had clients like that. These are the ones where you're sort of asking, is it two personalities or one fractured soul? It's like they're always trying to work out who they are and who they have to be to keep everybody happy. Eventually, their personality gets erased and replaced by whatever keeps the peace. It's hard to pick up what's going on until you've known them for a while. Something happens, and the next thing they know, they wake up one day and they don't know who they are. I had a client who had times where she literally could not remember her own name. She just drew a blank. Like the abuse was so pervasive, she had almost rejected her own identity. I swear to God, I had another client who would accidentally call me Your Honor because she was so used to being judged.
So we come back to the question, why do these people stay in relationships like that? I'm sure that for some of them, unconsciously, they're scared of being alone. The brain is wired for attachment. And even in the face of abuse, that instinct doesn't disappear overnight. It takes a lot of work to rewire those neural pathways and create a new way of being. The unknown is always scarier than the devil you know. And that's a hell of a hurdle to overcome.
Lola, you know what I think? I think we need to start teaching people how to be alone in the first place, how to sit with their own thoughts without immediately filling it with someone else's emotional garbage.
Being alone is like a foreign language for some people. They don't even know where to start. Sometimes teaching people healthy self-talk feels like teaching an ape to play chess. Jazz, how do you think the average person would feel if they were forced to spend a week alone with their own thoughts? I'm betting most people would rather go to war than be left to their own mental devices.
Being alone is the worst kind of torture. There's been a lot of studies around solitary confinement, and let me tell you, the thoughts that come up when you're stuck on your own, with the threat of abuse hanging over your head, they're not pretty. It's like a parade of all your deepest fears and insecurities to a soundtrack of your mama jokes. I know it's an extreme example, but the outcomes are pretty similar to codependency, just on a spectrum, you know?
Yeah, I get that. These relationships are kind of isolating. It makes these people extremely vulnerable to poor mental health. And then there are some people who stay in these relationships because they're unconsciously addicted to the adrenaline rush of the insanity. I call these people crackhead codependents. They unconsciously chase that moment of peace after the explosion, and then they forget how miserable they are in between. These kinds of people actually can't function in a healthy relationship. It's boring to them.
I've seen some codependents who can't even tolerate having a nice, quiet day. And they literally get anxious if their partner is being too nice for too long. This happens after people leave these relationships too, because unconsciously, they're just waiting for the next shitstorm and they literally can't relax, can't have downtime. These are the people you see who have to be distracted, have to keep busy like all the time.
Yes, but a lot of these people aren't just afraid of their abusers, they're afraid of themselves. They've been so conditioned to suppress their own needs and desires that they literally don't know who they should be without their partners. And a lot of the cause for this lies back in their family of origin. They weren't taught to explore their own values, needs, and desires. They just went along with whatever was expected of them, pleasing their parents, tolerating abuse from their siblings, and their relationships then just become an extension of that. The real problem these people experience is that they never learn to separate their personal identity from their relationship demands. Put simply, and here's your psychology mumbo jumbo jazz, they never learn to individuate.
Yeah, learning to be your own person is an important skill in life. The thought of not having anyone to cling to can be more terrifying than the toxic relationship. And if they leave the relationship, then they have to become somebody independent. And with no one to please, no one to validate who they are, they feel completely hollow inside. And that kind of transformation is paralyzing for someone who's spent years being molded by other people's demands. A metaphor I like to use is that we're all writing our own biography every day. I think it's a good way to look at life. But people stuck in codependency, they've just been a side character and someone else has actually been writing the story.
I've also counseled the other side, abusive codependents. I've had quite a few who literally get depressed when their partner is happy. They're like a human mood ring that only goes from gray to darker gray. Then they explode, say the most hurtful things to their partner, and follow it up with, oh, I just need some space. You know what space is? It's a fancy word for go away. Your feelings are inconvenient. I don't want to face any consequences for my actions. Not today, not ever. Then another client I had would actually get jealous over his partner's relationship with her own family. He would literally interrogate her after she'd talked to her mother on the phone. It's like he was convinced there was only enough love in the world for one person, and he was in a competition with everyone else who cared about her.
I had a client who was so insecure that she would actually sabotage her own success just to keep her partner from getting too threatened. She would purposely fail job interviews because her partner didn't like her getting too ambitious, which is code for if you're successful, you'll attract someone else and leave me.
Sabotage for love is so common. I saw a client once who would deliberately gain weight as revenge when her partner would spend too much time with his friends. He literally became too scared to leave the house because she would threaten to eat a whole tub of ice cream. It was like a psychological hostage exchange. Probably the most toxic dynamic I've ever seen.
Lola, we could trade war stories all day, but what really bothers me is when people start apologizing for having needs. They literally say sorry all the time. Sorry for breathing. Sorry for existing. Sorry for being in the same space as you. It's like they've convinced themselves they're a burden just for using up oxygen.
Yeah, no one needs to apologize for existing, Jazz. You know, one of the most common complaints from codependents describing their relationship is that it's like walking on eggshells. But you know, it's more like walking through a minefield blindfolded with a guide telling you where they want you to step. And the worst part? Pretty soon you can't put one foot in front of the other unless that guide is there for you. And your friends don't know if they should applaud your resilience or call the cops. People who lose themselves this way start developing a subtle form of helplessness, where they start deferring to their partner's opinion over their own on everything. Outfits, friends, career choices, even what they eat.
I have one client who would seek permission from her partner before she went to the bathroom, and she would get on the scale before he came home from work to make sure she hadn't gained any weight from eating lunch. Her relationship was like a never-ending performance. It's like she was constantly auditioning for the role of being a perfect partner in order to avoid feeling like a disappointment. It's like she was convinced that her entire value was wrapped up in this one person's approval.
That's often a dynamic that's a hangover from their family of origin. One person acts like the parent. The other acts like the child, continuously trying to win the praise or acceptance of the parent. I've also seen another dynamic on relationship forums. It's called love bombing. It's mostly used in reference to narcissism, but I've seen it in codependency as well. It usually starts in the dating phase, but can often continue throughout the relationship. And both parties can be guilty of this. They lavish attention on each other 1 minute, and then they decide they can't tolerate being close, so they suddenly become cold and distant the next. And if you're in this dynamic or on the receiving end of it, this push-pull scrambles your brain as you're constantly trying to gauge what's acceptable behavior from your partner and what's not. And often the brain can't quite succeed in making that distinction. So it starts trying to come up with narratives that make this situation coherent.
So, as we said at the start, this is one process by which the codependent brain rewires itself. It desperately wants to make this relationship acceptable, but it's the emotional equivalent of a crazy roller coaster ride with no seatbelts and a psychotic clown driver, and the mind takes on the role of the theme park electrician. It's frantically trying to rewire the ride to make it safe. But the thing is, these conditions create the perfect environment for other problems like gaslighting. And that leaves a lot of work for that electrician to do.
Gaslighting is pretty diabolical when you think about it. One partner twists the reality of the other so thoroughly that they start questioning their own perceptions and memories and their very grip on sanity itself. And because that partner has systematically undermined the other's ability to trust themselves, they wind up desperately clinging to the abusive partner as the only one who can validate what's real in their world.
This dynamic is what keeps people invested in the relationship, even when things are going horribly wrong. And trust me, I've seen it happen time and again. People make up narratives around saving their partner or get caught up in trying to prove their love that they forget about their own needs and boundaries.
The worst part? They start gaslighting themselves. The other person doesn't even have to speak. Their inner critic and people pleaser is constantly whispering messages like, "You're too sensitive," "It's your fault," or "You need to accommodate this." It's a classic self-abolition dynamic where their protector is missing in action. And that's what leaves these people open to the abuse.
The key breakout move, in my experience, is developing a fiercely independent sense of self. It's really an identity issue. And remember this, if someone consistently undermines your ability to trust yourself, they don't respect you. Period. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse, not an expression of love. Healthy partners don't punish you for daring to have your own opinion.
Jazz, we've gotten a bit off the track here. The breakthrough for Amelia came when she finally realized that she was a human being, not an object, that she deserved a life where she could breathe without asking permission. It was terrifying, but it was also the first step towards developing her own identity independent of the relationship. In part, it's the gradual erosion of boundaries that makes codependency so insidious. Amelia was probably able to rationalize each individual incident as its own thing, but when you string them all together over 15 years, it's a whole different ballgame. You end up somewhere you never intended to go at the start.
Lola, here's what I find really interesting. Years after some people leave these relationships, they still struggle with feelings of attachment. The psychological bonds forged over years of trauma are incredibly strong. And it's not uncommon for people to feel a sense of loss when they leave an abusive partner, even though objectively they know they're better off without them.
I think that what we've consistently shown here is that one of the biggest challenges for people in these situations is learning to develop a new internal dialogue. Amelia had been trained to second guess every feeling, every impulse, every desire. And what she learned over time is that the process of healing is about unlearning that conditioning and relearning how to listen to her own inner voice. It's a long process, but it's infinitely better than being in a relationship where you're constantly wondering when the next explosion will come and your own inner voice is constantly telling you that you're doing something wrong.
In codependency, there's a pressure to conform your identity into the person someone else thinks you should be. In the end, you're not respecting yourself, and it wreaks total havoc on the relationship container itself, often destroying it completely. It's like you're forcing yourself to wear a cheap Halloween costume. But here's what I think is the real lesson. Most people don't realize how much abuse they can tolerate until it gets to breaking point. Amelia probably spent years thinking that yelling and put-downs were just her partner's way of dealing with stress or their shitty sense of humor. But it often takes a catastrophic event to finally wake up to what's really happening.
Yeah, the story people keep telling is the one about the strength of love conquering all, about marriage as this sacred contract that binds us forever, come hell or high water. We convince ourselves that if we just try harder, if we just understand them better, if we just wait for them to change, someday it will get easier. The truth is, all the emotional labor in the world won't transform someone who can't see you as a human being, who only sees you in terms of the roles you need to fulfill, the rules you need to live by, and the expectations you need to meet. That's not being recognized as being a human, that's being used as a tool. You need boundaries, and you need standards, and you have to name it. You have to stop calling it your complicated marriage and start calling it what it is. Emotional abuse and a slow dissolution of your own personality. The minute you give it a label, it loses some of its power over you.
Yeah. The trouble is, because this stuff isn't talked about in schools, and we inherit our parents' language for explaining other people in relationships. So if you grew up in this dynamic, you're like a goldfish trying to understand air when you've only ever breathed water. So remember, a healthy relationship is not a prison sentence disguised as romance. And freedom and autonomy are not negotiable. They're essential.
Thanks for that, Jazz. It's a fascinating subject. I'm sure we could talk forever on it, but we're out of time today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. It's been interesting to hear your perspectives.
And you know me, I'm happy to share them. It's always a pleasure to be on the show, Lola. Thanks for having me.
Behind the Bites is a production of NW Studios. This episode was hosted by Lola Adams and Jazz Mendola. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with a friend who needs some psychological wisdom to navigate their own crazy relationships. Until next time, stay sane out there, or at least try to pretend like you are.